Welcome to Meet the Bloggers. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur. We've got a very interesting show for you this week. We're going to talk about the collapse of the middle class. We know we've got a recession, we've got a credit crisis, we've got a housing crisis, we've got gasoline prices going through the roof. But are we really getting stratified as a society into just the upper class and the lower class? And are we losing the middle class? And why is that happening, and how can we change it? Well, to help me do that, earlier I talked to Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm great, Cenk. Great to be with you.
It's great to hear you. I wanted to start with that first question, the most obvious question. Are we really losing the middle class? What is the, I know a lot of folks say, hey, look, we're going back to the days of the robber barons, the few rich folks up top, huddled masses, low income group. But is that really true? What is the factual basis for that?
Well, it is absolutely true. Cenk, a few months ago, I sent out an email to people in my own state of Vermont, and I said, you tell me what is going on in your lives right now. And we expected a few dozen responses. We got over 800 responses, and those responses just broke your heart. And in essence, what people were telling me is that they had believed they were in the middle class. But now, because of increased fuel prices, educational costs, health care costs, they no longer saw themselves in the middle class. They saw themselves economically desperate, just trying to hang on. Nationally, what we have seen since Bush has been president is 5 million people who are in the middle class have slipped into poverty. Median household income has gone down for working families by almost $2,500. 3 million Americans have lost their pensions. Over 8 million Americans have lost their health insurance. The gap between the very rich and everybody else is getting wider and wider. We continue to have by far the highest rate of childhood poverty in the industrialized world, almost 20% of our kids, and all over this country. No one disputes this. Middle-class families are saying, you know what? Unless we change things, my kids are going to be worse off economically than my family is. That's a race to the bottom. That's a collapse of the middle class.
Senator, I tell you, the one stat that really jumps out at me among the ones you cited there is median income falling $2,500 in the last 7 years. That's a startling number. So how did we get here, Senator? How did we get to a situation
what it has
where
to
we're
do,
losing this?
Cenk, what that has to do with the fact is we have lost millions of good-paying blue-collar jobs. We're on the cusp of losing millions of good-paying white-collar jobs. People are working longer hours for lower wages. They're paying more out of their own pocket for health insurance. We have a disastrous trade policy. People are going into debt more than we have seen since in decades. That is the reality.
But what were the laws?
The fact of the matter is that right now, pardon me?
I'm sorry, what were the laws that were passed or the regulations that were passed? How did we get here? That's what I really want to identify.
Well, there are a number of factors. I would say that our disastrous trade policies, and that's permanent normal trade relations with China, NAFTA, CAFTA, have enabled corporations all over this country to throw American workers out on the street and move abroad. The fact that we are the only nation in the industrialized world without a national health care program has meant that more and more people are losing their health insurance. Their costs are soaring. The fact that we're way behind Scandinavia and Europe in making sure that college is affordable is a huge deal as well. Not to mention the whole foreclosure crisis where people are getting ripped off in terms of the promises made to them as to what their mortgages would be. So it's a combination of lower wages and increased costs. So
one of the things that I want to concentrate on here is the Republicans always say, well, there isn't enough money. But actually there is. There's nearly $250 million that the Air Force has gotten in spare parts that they're already putting towards disposal. So they're going to throw it in the trash. It's $250 million in the trash. And we know how much money they've spent on Iraq. So the question is, Senator Sanders, why is there always enough money to fight other countries, but not enough money to fight poverty?
Well, Cenk, I think you've put your finger right on the issue. And in fact, we introduced legislation that would just reverse that process. We are spending $515 billion every single year on the military. This is above and beyond the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. Meanwhile, President Bush has tried to cut back on virtually every program that helps middle class or working families. Meanwhile, on top of a huge military budget, which is rift, absolutely rift with duplication, waste, and profiteering, on top of that, Bush and his friends have given hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the wealthiest 1%, and then they want to repeal the estate tax, which would give $1 trillion over 20 years to the top 0.3%. So you're right. If you are rich, they have money for you for tax breaks. If you're part of the military-industrial complex, your Halliburton and all of these companies that get no bid contracts, we have all money for you. But if you're struggling to take care of your kids in America, if you're struggling to heat your home this coming winter, if you're struggling to be able to do the right thing by your family, sorry, we don't have enough money for you. And that is the dynamic of what's going on in American society today.
Senator Sanders, how do we get out of this mess? I understand now what the mess is and how we got into it. Is there laws that we pass, regulations? How do we get to a strong, healthy middle class?
Well, there are many things that we've got to do, Cenk, but they go beyond legislation, specific pieces of legislation. What we really need is a political revolution in this country. And I want to tell you that what you're doing on programs like this, allowing people to hear an alternative point of view rather than the corporate media, is an important part of what we've got to do. Because essentially what happens is the reality that faces the ordinary people in this country is very, very rarely discussed. And most of corporate media, in terms of political coverage, is an effort to deflect attention away from the reality facing most people. So number one, we need a revolution in media. We need to raise political consciousness in this country so that millions of people are saying, hey, how come we are the only country in the world without, in the industrialized world, without a national health care program? You don't see that discussed very much. How come we have the greatest gap and the most unfair income distribution and wealth distribution of any major country on earth? Have you seen CBS discussing that? What about the morality of kids in this country sleeping out on the street and giving tax breaks to billionaires? So I think what we essentially need to do is force discussion on the issues that the corporate media doesn't want to discuss.
Let me ask you
one thing we've got to do.
I'm sorry, let me ask you a quick
follow-up. And the second thing is we need a
that.
strong grassroots political movement to fight for progressive change, to take on the big money interests.
Senator Sanders, let me ask you a quick follow-up on the media. You know, the Republicans are doing their job. Their job is to get as much money as they can to the rich folks and to the military-industrial complex. Mission accomplished. But it seems to me the two things that are failing here are the Democratic Party in fighting back and the media in bringing the information to folks, just as you were saying there. So what can we change about the corporate media to get them to cover things fairly, to point out, hey, John McCain is going to give another enormous tax break to the corporations and redistribute money that way?
Well, I'm not overly optimistic. I mean, the corporate media is doing what they're supposed to do, which is to protect the interests of large multinational corporations, to make sure that you know everything about Britney Spears and Paris Hilton, but very little about why we're spending $515 billion on the military, giving tax breaks to billionaires. I'm not sure that you know, the way we can change it is have people put as much pressure as possible on their local media, on the corporate media. We certainly in Washington have got to do everything that we can to stop increased media consolidation, and we've got to move it in the other direction. But I think also, as citizens, we have got to support alternative media and figure out through the internet and through other mechanisms how we get a progressive voice out throughout this country.
Senator, we're so out of time, but I want to do one real quick follow-up with you. The problem is that the Republicans put pressure on the media all the time. They always complain and say, hey, you guys are liberal, and it works. That's complaining to the refs. Yes. Does the Democratic Party understand they need to put equal and opposite pressure on the media? Otherwise, they're not going to get
I really
coverage?
do not think that they do. I remember when I was in the House, Tom DeLay was the majority leader. He called in CNN. He said, this is the communist news network. And you know what? They changed. They became more conservative. I think the Democrats have got to step up to the plate and be more aggressive. The idea that the media today, the major media, which is owned by large multinational corporations, is quote-unquote liberal, is by definition a totally absurd statement.
Senator Sanders, you have to start calling them now the conservative news network. Do the opposite. Thank you so much for joining us on Meet the Bloggers. We really appreciate it, Senator Sanders.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, guys, we're going to take a real quick break now, but you can still blog it out on the live blog. Send us your rants, raves, participate in the polls that we've got up as well. And remember, you could also share Meet the Bloggers with your friends on Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, or you could do an old-fashioned email to your friends to let them know about Meet the Bloggers. Right back. Hi, it's Cenk from Meet the Bloggers. If you like the issue we're discussing this week, you can find out so much more about it on our partner blogs. HuffingtonPost.com, Alternet.org, ThinkProgress.org, JackandJillPolitics.com, OfAmerica.wordpress.com, and TheYoungTurks.com. We blog about the issue before and after the show, so you can check it out all week long.
I'm Robert Greenwald, the executive producer of Meet the Bloggers, and I'm very happy to let you know that Michael Moore will be our very special guest Friday, August 22nd. And Mike is going to answer your questions. So go to meetthebloggers.org, where we can hear your voice, see your face, and the best questions will be selected and given to Michael Moore on Friday, August 22nd, when he comes on to talk about and share his new book with us. See you then.
All right, welcome back to the show. Now we're going to keep discussing the collapse of the middle class, why we got to that situation, and how we can get out. And in order to help us do that, we've got two great bloggers who are experts on this issue. First is Isaiah Poole. He's the executive editor of ourfuture.org. He's worked for more than 25 years as an editor and reporter, also a founding member of the Washington Association of Black Journalists and the National Lesbian and Gay Journalists Association. His work has put him in the front lines of the ideological fight between progressive and conservatism. And Amanda Logan is a research associate with the economic policy team at the American Progress. Her work largely focuses on issues surrounding lower and middle income American families, including prices for necessities, wages and benefits, economic distress, and how they view economic policy. Welcome, guys. How are you?
Good. Well. Glad to be here.
All right. Excellent. Isaiah, let me start with you. Let's go to the first question we went to with Senator Sanders, which is, are we really in as bad a mess as people are saying? What are the numbers and the facts to back up this idea that the middle class is collapsing and we're getting a stratified society?
Well, Senator Sanders is absolutely right about this. If you look at the numbers just for the last 7 years alone, depending on how you measure it, we're talking about families who are, median income families losing anywhere between $1,100 and $2,500 in inflation-adjusted terms. In other words, their real income has dropped over the last 7 years, while their expenses, the money that they had to lay out for food, for energy, etc., for education, that has increased on the order of around $4,500 a year in that same period. The bottom line, less money coming in, more money going out in real terms. And while the top 1%, as Senator Sanders pointed out, their real income has grown astronomically, over 400%.
You know, it's interesting. I saw actually on our Robert Borisage has written an article, and he pointed out that the top 1% of the 1%, 25% of the growth in income over the last 6 years, from 2000 to 2006 actually. 25% of the growth in income went to the top 1% of 1%. Meanwhile, the bottom 90% got only 4% of the income growth. So
well, in fact, we're talking about that 25% going to about 15,000 people, just to give you a sense of what we're talking about here. But this is something that rolls back really to the Reagan era. And it rolls back to the policies of trickle-down economics, where we thought that by giving tax cuts to the very wealthy and tilting policy to the very wealthy, that somehow that would trickle down to the rest of us. We have seen over a 30-year period now the opposite happening, wealth flowing from the bottom to the top.
All right, Amanda, I want to go to another set of numbers for you. You know, it's not just that the average has fallen, but it's how people adjust. So tell us about that a little bit.
Well, like Isaiah said, we're seeing this across a number of areas, declining, especially over the current business cycle, but really going back farther than that. For example, a colleague and I recently took a look at the share of middle-class Americans who have enough income saved up to withstand an unspecified emergency that would cost them to rely on 3 months of income, and that number has declined significantly to just under 30% of middle-class families, down from almost 40% in 2000. The similar trend holds for the number of families who are able to withstand a medical emergency. Again, we've seen over the last 7 years the share of families who have access to a health insurance plan decline significantly, let alone other benefits such as retirement savings. Finally, the share of families who are in a position to be able to handle a spell of unemployment for a couple of months, which is becoming a real reality or a growing concern for many families, as we've seen the labor market weaken considerably since the beginning of the year especially. But again, only 44.1% of families in 2007 were prepared to weather a spell of unemployment, down from 51% in 2000. And as we are hearing numbers in the headlines in recent months, you know, we've lost over 400,000 jobs in the economy since the beginning of the year. You've talked about income, but I think it's also jarring to know that real hourly wages have only increased 0.9% since, or rather between March 2001 and June of 2008, and real weekly wages have actually declined by 0.3% during the same period. So families have been feeling this for a while. It is great that the media is starting to talk about it. It's sad that it's taken this long for, you know, such a huge portion of American families to really be feeling the pain of skyrocketing energy, food, utility, education, housing prices. But this has been something that's been going on for quite some time, and we need to really start a serious conversation about it now, especially policymakers.
All right, Isaiah, so this is the mess that we're in. How did we get here? What were some of the laws or regulations that were passed, or deregulation, that caused us to get into this mess in the first place?
Well, you know, in order to have good wages, employees have to be empowered through unions to bargain for those wages. You recall during the Reagan administration, starting with the air traffic controller strike, you had almost a virtual war against unions and unionizations that has flowed to this very day, when we see Walmart now under scrutiny for telling its employees that they should not vote for Democratic candidates who support the Employee Free Choice Act. Again, you have a tax code in which wealth was essentially rewarded through the tax code with more wealth, while for those of us who have been dependent on a lot of the traditional safety nets, whether they are safety nets such as government safety nets, or even things like pension programs, a lot of those have been eroded over the years.
You know, and let me add one more thing here before we go to the break, guys. Phil Gramm helped to pass two laws, the Financial Modernization Act and the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. And what they did was they took away some of the regulation in terms of how the financial industry could swap their loans out to one another and how much assets they needed to cover losses. And when they did that, they basically took the one check away from the financial industry that they needed. And what wound up happening is they wound up giving out more and more loans without the assets to cover it up. And that's why companies like Bear Stearns failed. And now we have these enormous problems with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So if we hadn't passed those laws, I remember Phil Gramm, of course, top financial advisor for John McCain until he got into trouble recently. If we hadn't passed those laws, we might not have had the housing collapse that we had here. So laws matter. All right, guys, stay right there. We're going to come back with our video of the week and discuss how we can get out of this mess. And remember, everybody, you can still participate through the live blog. We're taking your questions, and we're looking at the poll results as well. Jonathan Kim of foxattacks.org is running it today. So we'll be right back.
Hey everyone, it's Jim Gilliam at Brave New Foundation. We need your help to make Meet the Bloggers. Come to meetthebloggers.org and give us your ideas for guests for the show, questions to ask guests that are coming up, issues that you want to see covered, your favorite bloggers that you would like to see on the show. And you can also participate live every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern and ask questions while the show is actually going on the air and participate in live viewer polls as well. So check it out every Friday, 1 p.m. Eastern at meetthebloggers.org.
If we do all the things that bloggers are doing to try and make sure that those on the Judiciary Committee don't let Rove get away with it, there's a very good chance that he will actually be brought to justice.
I expect to see all these big noses out there on the Senate floor because these are outright fabrications.
The more troops there are, the more that the Afghan people feel that they are either going to bear civilian casualties because of the presence of our troops, or that they're just being occupied.
All right, welcome back to the show, guys. Now it's time for our video of the week, and this is from YouTube. It's called Save Our Economy, and we took a small part of it, but this is very telling as to who's making the money and where the money's coming from. Let's watch.
Wall Street and these investment bankers have taken hundreds of millions of dollars out of the system annually.
Today, lawmakers grilling two former Wall Street CEOs about why they were paid millions, in some cases hundreds of millions, when their companies lost billions thanks to their subprime exposure.
You know, you have people like Angelo Mozillo that has collectively cashed out nearly $500 million worth of stock options over the last 3 or 4 years.
CEO's pay structure encouraged some risk-taking that actually led to the subprime-related losses.
The problem is that price appreciation was a phantom. It never really existed. So now the prices are coming back into line with income and earnings power, but the debt's still there. And that's a big problem because as that debt starts to default, the people who own that paper now own a house instead. The problem is the house isn't worth what they gave you for it. So now they have a real loss that has to be recognized, and that's creating additional problems in the economy. So we have these bankers who have their hands out screaming that they need to be bailed out. They've taken all of this money out of the system and pocketed it, and now that it turns out that they actually ripped people off, they have the gall to come out and ask us as American citizens to take on the bill to make sure that they don't go out of business.
Here's the thing, Isaiah. You know, we have a poll about this on the live blog, too, whether we should bail them out or not. My gut says, don't bail them out. They already got all this money. But at the same time, it might cause an economic collapse. So what's the answer here?
I think that the answer is that if you have decided after looking at all the options that you have to bail out an industry like a Fannie Mae or a Freddie Mac, that is done with some strict accountability. First of all, the CEOs who are responsible for the mess shouldn't benefit from the cleanup. So the fact that they're able to still collect their multi-million-dollar salaries should be abhorrent to everyone. But secondly, we should change the regulatory structure that they operate in so those mistakes don't happen again, and hold them strictly accountable for their behavior. And when they misbehave again, the public doesn't pay for their misbehavior. They pay for their misbehavior.
Amanda, what are some progressive ideas for how to revive the middle class? How do we get out of this mess?
Well, in the big picture, We need to abandon what the administration has been doing recently and really having a complete disregard for balance and long-term sustainability. And as both you and Isaiah have pointed out, get some of the benefit from the growth that the American economy has had and will continue to have more widely shared. You know, we've had a productivity increase in this country, something like 19% over the past 7 years, and yet wages have declined by 2%. So policies that could get things more on track for the majority of Americans who are hurting are, you know, starting very basically doing things to improve the labor market, doing things to improve incomes from the very, you know, things that administrations have opposed recently but seem relatively simple in the long term, such as continuing to raise the minimum wage, getting it indexed to inflation, expanding the earned income tax credit, and increasing opportunities for people to join unions. In the more long-term, bigger picture, we need to really take a look at how we're going to have sustainable, widespread growth by, you know, re-examining our energy policy. We've had a taste this summer of what our kind of addiction to oil is doing for us, and we need to diversify our energy portfolio. We need to look into the technologies. There's a huge opportunity for the United States to become a leader in the energy sector, and we could capture that opportunity right now and get more, better paying jobs that require a skilled workforce. So there's really a range of opportunities out there. We just need to get the dialogue going to talk about infrastructure, talk about investment in our future and in the government and the American middle class.
All right, Amanda and Isaiah, we really appreciate you guys coming on. And of course, there's so much more to talk about this, but luckily that's why you can check out our blogs throughout the week, where at thinkprogress.org and ourfuture.org, Amanda and Isaiah and the rest of the folks there will continue to blog about this topic. And we want to thank not only you guys for viewing in, but we want to thank Meet the Bloggers viewer Rosemary Pritzker, who donated to the show. She said, quote, "We have to win this election. There's no other option. We're talking the fate of the world here." Rosemary, I couldn't agree more. And she said, we couldn't do this show without your contributions, and we really appreciate it. And that's all for our show today. But remember, next week we have Michael Moore on. So we're going to take your questions for Michael Moore, and we're going to select the best ones and pose it to him. You could also win his book if you participate at meetthebloggers.org throughout the week. And I want to remind you guys, of course, our show is next week at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific with Michael Moore. So it's going to be terrific. And until then, do something. Keep tuning in to Meet the Bloggers, because we've got some great guests coming up, including Michael Moore on August 22nd. Go to meetthebloggers.org throughout the week to send us your questions for Michael Moore and all of our other guests.